every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound out as the golden sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Praising the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Slowly the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat, and let our weary feet come to the place for which our God has died. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of a bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast died unlight, let us into the light, keep us forever in the path we tread. Lest our feet stray from the places our God where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath our land, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
Good morning, Clinton College students, faculty, staff, alumni, and friends. My name is Latasia White. I am a sophomore from Irvington, New Jersey, majoring in biology. Welcome to the 8th installment of the Spring 2022 Virtual Beacon Forum series of Clinton College. This month, we are dedicating our focus to celebrating the excellence and resilience of Black women. We have had an exceptional lineup of dynamic speakers and panelists all month. Happy Women's History Month to all of my amazing sisters out there doing great things in the world. I invite you to go back and watch the playback of the previous weeks in the awesome series. Speaking of women who are doing great things in the world, I have to pause to say again, congratulations to the women's basketball team of Clinton College who won the conference title. Woo woo! I also salute Logan Taylor McDaniel on being named EMAC Player of the Year. Our very own Coach Jessica Blair was named USCAA Coach of the Year. Congratulations, Logan and Coach Blair. We are so proud of you and the women's basketball team. Clinton women are truly making their mark in the world. Yes, they are. Our men's basketball team was also named conference champs. Shout out to Coach D. Frazier and the men. In that same spirit of excellence, we are delighted to have Dr. Brittany Cooper, professor at Rutgers University in New Jersey, as our guest speaker today. We invite Clinton College students and viewing audience to share your questions and reflections in the comments throughout today's event and especially during the Q&A. We want your input. On behalf of the entire Clinton College family, we say thank you to our friends from the community for spending part of your day with us. Be sure to follow our social media platforms for updates on future events, new academic programs, course offerings, and other activities. We hope you will enjoy today's broadcast.
Good morning, Clinton family. My name is Tamiko Coleman, and I'm a religious studies student from Staten Island, New York. Would you bow your heads and pray with me? Most heavenly and gracious Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for this virtual space that we can once again get together and for Beacon Forum. Father, I ask that you continue to pour out your blessings on this Women's History Month. Father, I ask that you bless our Vice President of the United States of America, Kamala Harris. Father, I ask that you bless our former First Lady of the United States in the form of Michelle Obama. Father, I ask that you continue to bless mothers across this country, especially my mother, Carolyn A. Coleman. Father, I ask that you bless my female classmates, all the women's faculty of Clinton College. Father, I ask that you touch this guest speaker of today, Dr. Brittany Cooper, in a special way today. Father, give her a message that is especially for us women of this world. Father, I ask that you continue to just touch women all over this world. Bring them up to where you would have them to be. This is my prayer this morning in Jesus' name. Amen. Good morning, Latasia. Happy Women's History Month to you.
Thank you, sis. Same to you. It is so good to co-host today's broadcast of Beacon Forum with you.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much. It is an honor to share the responsibility of introducing today's featured speaker, Dr. Brittany Cooper. Dr. Brittany Cooper is an associate professor of women's, gender, and sexuality studies and Africana Studies at Rutgers University in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Excuse me. She is an author of the New York Times bestseller, Eloquent Rage and Black Feminist Discovers Her Superpower.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a book. I need to add that to my collection. Did you know Dr. Cooper is also author of the award-winning Beyond Respectability, The Intellectual Thought of Race to Women? Girl, she is co-author of Feminist AF, A Guide to Crushing Girlhood, and co-editor of the Crunk Feminist Collection. She is highly respected scholar, activist, and licensed minister of the gospel.
Oh, wow. But she is also a contributing writer for The Cut, a New York magazine, a contributor at Black News Channel, and a frequent commentator of MSNBC. What a privilege it is to have one of the leading voices of justice in this country with us this morning. Join us
Yes,
in
and
welcoming
welcoming
our
our
speaker
speaker
for
for
today,
today, Dr. Brittany
Brittany
Cooper.
Cooper. Woo!
Woo!
Welcome,
Welcome, Dr. Cooper.
Dr.
Thank you for
Cooper.
being here.
Thank you so much, ladies. What an amazing introduction. You're both so dynamic. I'm super grateful to be here. Hi, everyone. I want to talk about being prepared. You are prepared. I want to begin by thanking my brother, Dr. Tony McNeil, for this invitation. I also am thankful to President McCorn and thankful to Sister Dr. Cassandra Jones. It is truly my pleasure to be here. One of the things to know about me is that I am a kid that was raised in the shadow of many Black colleges. I am a proud Black college alum, an alumna of Howard University. I know among the HBCU set that we can be quite insufferable. And so I have experienced that, and I will try not to do it. But it's all HBCU love when we have the opportunity to be together. But I was raised down the street from Grambling State University, and I spent a lot of time there as an Upward Bound kid when I was a young person, and doing various summer programs. I was, uh, uh, I applied to Dillard University as a young person as well when I was on my way to college. And so I have great love for Black colleges, for their mission, and for what they do. And one of the things that I want to do is begin with a couple of stories about my time at Howard University, how I think it's formative and how it has shown me across the nearly 25 years since I first entered the campus as a freshman student. The ways in which we are prepared, the ways in which Black colleges leave us with a sense of preparation for all that is to come. So, in my freshman year at Howard, my very first course was taught by a professor in the English department at Howard at the time, Dr. Lawrence Jackson. He walks into class on the first day of class and he puts a big map of the world on the floor. It's a freshman composition course, and so we're all sitting in desk around this map. And we look at the map, and the map looks odd. And it looks odd because essentially half of the map is of the continent of Africa. All of the other continents are on this map, but Africa is outsized compared to any map that we've ever seen. So we start asking him, why is Africa so big on this map? This map looks a little weird. And he says, this map is drawn to scale. And so there's silence across the room because we know that drawn to scale means that this is actually Africa's size in proportion to other continents. And it is bigger than most of the other continents on the map. So all of a sudden he sees the confusion and the light bulbs going off, and he says, why do you think that you've never seen a map of the world with Africa drawn this large before? And there is a whole lesson and a whole lifetime of learning in that question. We know why we hadn't seen it before, because there's a way that our ancestors, after they were dragged to these shores, were subject to a centuries-long campaign of demonization of everything about us, a dehumanization campaign, and a desire to make us believe that having beautiful brown skin, made us bad, evil, unintelligent, untrustworthy, and therefore subject to what the scholar Ruth Gilmore calls premature death, which is her definition of the word racism. So that encounter was perhaps singular in its desire to make me become a professor, both because my world was changed. In that moment, my perspective was broadened because all of a sudden, I realized that I had come to Howard. I had arrived on the campus of this HBCU, and in one class, so much of what I'd been taught to think about myself as a student and a person in the world was upended. And I thought the only people that have the power to do that are educators, people who dedicate their life to teaching other people. And so Howard, instilled in me a love for my Blackness. It undid any anti-Blackness that I had imbibed over many years in a predominantly white school system. Let me tell you another story. So senior year, I was in the honors program at Howard, and I hadn't read a lot about feminism or Black women or any of that, other than like reading the novels of folks like Zora Neale Hurston and various Caribbean writers, and also Toni Morrison, who's a Howard University alum like Hurston. And so I, one day, uninformed, made the comment that feminism is for white women. And one of my homegirls was nearby in earshot. And she didn't say anything at the time. Her brow kind of wrinkled and she didn't say anything. And then we get back to the dorm later, and she lived across the hall from me. And so she comes over and she says, "Girl, you were talking real crazy today in the honors office. And here's a book. You need to read it and inform yourself because, like, of course you would be a feminist, right?" And so I learned both the contours of what I had learned at Howard and at beginning freshman year, and then what I still had yet to learn beginning senior year. If you know anything about me, or even if you're just meeting me today, I am a Black feminist scholar. I have committed my life's work to celebrating, studying, interrogating, and uplifting the lives and the contributions of Black women and girls across history, really beginning in the 19th century. That is what I do. But the seeds for that, the preparation for that, was laid at Howard University, was laid on the campus of my HBCU. And so, in every course that you're taking, in every conversation that you are part of, whether that learning is happening in the classroom, the virtual classroom in this pandemic moment, or it's happening in these conversations with your friends, a life trajectory is being charted by the choices that you make in this moment. And that feels really important for me to say. So I left Howard and I felt like I could go out and I could conquer the world. And here's why that's really important. Because I mentioned that I grew up as a Black girl running around the campus of Grambling State University. I'm a working class Black girl. I was raised by a single mom. My dad passed away when I was very young. I am the first person in my family to graduate from college. And so I didn't come up with a spoon in the mouth or with all of this privileged access. I relied on the programs that were made available to me to learn how to navigate the university system. I didn't even really think about being a professor. All I'd ever seen Black women do in my life in terms of teaching were be elementary school teachers, which is amazing and which was also pivotal and transformative. But when I saw that you could be like a professor of college students, my world expanded again. And so, I am so thankful for that experience and that time, and also thankful for the ways that this season of education positioned me to do the kind of work that I do. And so in subsequent years, I became a professor after doing a PhD at Emory University. And now in my work, I teach and I write about Black feminist thought, about the contributions of Black women like Anna Julia Cooper, who is a sort of primary 19th century Black woman theorist and writer who championed the lives of Black women, women like Mary Church Terrell, folks like Pauli Murray, who today would be understood as a trans or non-binary person, but who in Pauli's lifetime was considered, a feminist pioneer, and all of that. Folks like Toni Cade Bambara, Fannie Barrier Williams. Some of those are names that you have heard. Some of those are names that you might not have heard. But I like to say that my life is about my love affair with Black women. They are the folks with whom I feel safest. And I feel like we live in a world that continues to devalue Black women's intellectual production, and to tell us that if we don't do it the way the white boys do it, right? And I'm certainly saying it in my Southern colloquial, like, they're not that impressive, right? You want to know how I know they're not that impressive? Because if you've been watching the Supreme Court, nominees confirmation hearings this week, what you see is a Black woman who is utterly impressive, overqualified to be in a room like that. And what you see is, in the main, a bunch of white men, some white women who are incredibly underqualified, haven't even really earned the right to a conversation, being disrespectful. And you see Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson maintaining her demeanor at all times, right? But that's something that we learn. We learn that poise in the face of indignity coming up in our community. We learn it in our college spaces. We are trained for this. We are prepared for this. We learn what it means to be rigorous. We learn what it means to be overqualified when we're burning the midnight oil to get our work done. We learn what it means to position ourselves to make history. And we also come to understand a really hard truth about that, one that really attends to Black women's lives, which is that you can be the most qualified person in the room, and very often the sister is the most qualified person in the room, and that will be an invitation to the disrespect of your colleagues. That's the hardest truth there is. you're not, when you get this education at Clinton College, it's not going to be a buffer between you and disrespect. Make no mistake. It is going to put you in rooms where you are going to experience the disrespect firsthand. You're going to experience the originators of the disrespect, because now you're going to be sitting in rooms with people that have power and decision-making ability and no moral compass to speak of. And all of those things are things that you're getting in this moment, in this space, that you are being prepared to deal with. And so that set of things is a set of things that Howard did for me. So when I, in my career, I've written a few books at this point. I'm very thankful for that, because look, that I wrote those books with weeping and gnashing of teeth. Like, it was not always easy to do. But Beyond Respectability, which is my first book, which was based on my doctoral dissertation, was really me making a particular argument about Black women and saying that folks like Anna Julia Cooper and Ida B. Wells and Mary Church Terrell, right, who were these 19th and 20th century writers, civil rights activists, and feminists, that they were intellectuals, that it wasn't just about the institutional work that they did, and they built amazing institutions to take care of Black communities, but they were thinkers who created ideas that were to be used to be helpful for us as we navigated and charted our path, first out of slavery and then into something that looked like freedom. And so I wanted to write about the folks, so like I have a life philosophy, which is that I always go with my girls, right? Like I believe in friendship as a way of life. And I didn't know any of the women that I wrote about in Beyond Respectability. I probably wouldn't have known them even if I lived in the same time as them, but I certainly didn't know them. But they're my intellectual homegirls that I take with me into the spaces where I am. Their ideas are the ideas that I teach, that I write about, and that are anchor points for me. And so I wrote that book for them as an homage to them, but also as a way to say to my academic colleagues, like, there's some serious folk out here and you need to pay attention, right? And in that way, I got to be in a tradition of Black feminist scholarship. And then I wrote a book called Eloquent Rage, which is a really different book than Beyond Respectability. But that's my book where if you came over to the house and we sat on the sofa and had a glass of wine, this is how we would talk about Black feminist thought. This is how we would talk about the plight of Black women. And one of the things that I essentially tried to say is that this idea of Black women as being angry and out of control and a threat is a stereotype and a set of lies and rumors propagated by white supremacy that has been perpetrated against us really since we arrived on these shores. And many Black women run from that, and we run from it by trying to be hyper respectable and professional at all times. Because we don't want to be accused of being irrational. We don't want to be accused of not being on top of our game. And that puts us in the position where our anger is often weaponized against us. So I think two things about that. The first is, but we have the right to be angry, though. I'm mad. I'm angry when I watch the Supreme Court justice confirmation hearings and I see all of these powerful folks deliberately misunderstanding, mischaracterizing, and disrespecting Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. I'm even angrier when that happens to me at my job, when I have to walk into powerful places or places with powerful people who, overestimate their own intelligence. When I know that I have done the work, burned the midnight oil, read the books, gotten the degrees, and still what that is the invitation to the disrespect, right? I'm angry when when police officers kill unarmed Black youth. I'm angry when police officers over police Black people who tell them that they have weapons, folks like Philando Castile. I'm angry that we have to fight to have more attention paid to police killings of Black women like Breonna Taylor than we have to when there are young men in our community who are killed. I'm angry as a Black woman that I don't just have a singular struggle, which is a struggle against racism or white supremacy, but I also have to struggle against sexism, and at points in my life, have had to overcome the limitations of growing up a working class Black girl. We have Black people in our communities that have to overcome struggles around homophobia and transphobia, right? And ableism. And so there are all these kinds of Black struggle. And yet, in our communities, often we are asked to reduce our struggle simply to a struggle over racism. And because I'm never not myself, let me say, and sometimes I'm angry with Black men who resent Black women who point out that the story and the narrative is not simply one about white supremacy for us. Far too often, Black women run institutions, support families, support communities. We become the Black girls that are sent off from our communities to make it, while many times Black boys stay at home. They are ensnared by these systems, right? We often make it out and then we're resented for the rest of our lives because we made it out, right? I'm angry about that, angry about the ways in which we have to fight the world outside our door. And then we have to come into the house and fight the people who look like us and who should care about us because we dare to try to have more for ourselves. That is why I couldn't simply continue with my analysis of my struggle as a Black woman, as a Black girl, as only being about white supremacy. Because if I made it only about that, then I only had half of the story. And so I became a Black feminist. And part of the journey has been recognizing my right to my rage, recognizing my right to get angry. Because when we watch what is happening in those SCOTUS hearings, we learn that we live in a world that induces Black women's rage, right? Does things to make us mad. You know, you ever been you've been trying to walk away from a fight, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, debate, right? And people just keep on provoking you. Maybe that's just my life, right? Because I know only old people use Facebook, but you understand what I'm saying. People do things to provoke you. You're trying to walk away from the fight. And now, not only do you have to walk away from the fight, but now you got to pretend that you're not mad that you were provoked. See how that makes no sense? Make it make sense. So, Eloquent Rage was my offering to Black women to say, you have the right to your anger. And also, now you have the right to determine what you're going to do with the energy of that anger, how you're going to use it to power the work that you want to see, so that the anger does not destroy you, so that the keeping it in and pretending like it isn't there does not destroy you, right? I come out of a Black church tradition, and Bible says, be ye angry and sin not. It doesn't say that our anger is wrong or bad, or that it is a thing to be contained. It says that, in fact, when we are angry, it assumes that we probably will get angry, that our job is to not be unjust or unrighteous in the expression of that anger. And so this was my attempt at reclamation as a way to say to and for Black women, I see you. We live in a world designed for us not to win, but we're going to win anyway. Right. And we're going to win anyway, because the very thing that folks want to weaponize against us is going to be the energy that powers our learning, our teaching, our doing, and the way in which we love our communities. And Black girls in particular need to know that, it's okay to be mad, need to know that as you've been robbed of particular experiences in this pandemic, it is okay to feel grief, okay to feel sad, okay to feel angry. When I read Ida B. Wells and Mary Church Terrell, these amazing 19th century Black women, they were young women in the aftermath in Reconstruction. And during the Reconstruction period in this country, Black people actually were able to have a certain modicum of rights, were able to vote, were able to ride on public accommodations unsegregated in the 19th century. And then by the time we got into the 20th century, into the 1950s and 60s, those rights had been taken away. So imagine having rights as a young person and then look at life as an old person having to struggle to get the rights back that you already had. Oh, yes. That seems like the struggle we're in now, that you were born into a world where certain rights were available to you, and you might have to come into your adulthood and old age with those rights being taken from you. But my point to you is that you are not the first generation to go through that. And that the reason why I write about the Black women that I do is because when I write about them, when I call their names, when I invoke my cloud of witnesses, I'm doing that to remind myself that I don't get to descend into pessimism about the struggles that we face in this moment, because I am buoyed by generations worth of work and analysis and theory and ideas that help me to understand that, yes, much of what we do as Black women is we fight. But we also love. We love our communities. We love on each other. We love on ourselves. We take care of our business. And even when it gets tough, sometimes we still win. And for me, that is enough of a reason to keep going. So I have built a career championing Black women. I love the period between Black History Month and Women's History Month. I mean, this is the time every year that people rediscovered that there are like dope Black women in the world that you can talk to about issues and whatnot. And so, I do a lot of work, particularly pre-Ponderosa. I did a lot of work on the road, less today because it's not super safe. But this season reminds us, is our season, is our moment. And so that is the thing that I would say, the sort of analysis about what it means to be a Black woman in the world and the work we get to do. It's not all burden, right? There is a lot of joy in this work. And there's a lot of joy getting to watch Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's facial expressions. And so you are in a season where you have been prepared for this moment. You are being prepared. There is no challenge that I have faced in my life where I haven't been able to look back over my time in educational spaces, particularly my time at Howard, and recognize, or my time even as a younger person at Grambling State, and recognize that I have been prepared for this moment. You are prepared. As you read, as you study, as you listen to your professors, as you take the opportunities made available to you, you are being prepared. Thank you.
Dr. Cooper, thank you so much for what you have shared with us about being prepared. And I want to introduce myself to you. I am Cassandra Eileen Jones. I am a professor of religion, relatively new, just about a little over a year at Clinton College, but a little over 20 years in higher education. I too am a proud alumna of Spelman College, another HBCU. So I agree with everything you said about how HBCUs lay a foundation for success, whatever path you take. Growing up in San Francisco, I needed to be in an environment that celebrated me and all of the brilliance in me. And that's what HBCUs do. I would like to, I want to talk about Eloquent Rage just a little bit. I was able to see a video interview when you were talking about Eloquent Rage, and you were talking about where that name came from, the title came from. And when you said this, because you were talking about the rage part, and I was reminded that it was not until I got into higher education that people started saying, "You're angry. You're always enraged."
That's right.
And that would make me angry, but I would say, look, I'm just passionate.
Right.
And, these were all white people because most of my career has been in predominantly white institutions. And you said this in your conversation on YouTube. You said that the rage empowers the rigor rather than empowers the rigor of your work rather than limiting your work. And that liberated me because yes, I push my students. I have a different way of teaching, but especially in the white institutions, because I'm trying to educate them in so many different ways, not just in the content.
That's right.
So I appreciate that. And I also wanted to say that last week, it's so funny that I'm leading this conversation. Last week, I received the word that the course that I developed on womanist theology for another was accepted.
Wonderful.
And one of my books for the required reading is Eloquent Rage.
Oh, wow.
I can't wait for the fall to teach this class.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
So I want to ask you, in teaching, especially in predominantly white institutions, and you are a Black woman.
Yeah.
That's a different adventure in itself.
Yeah. So
what would you share with our students who are preparing for careers in higher education?
Yeah. Look, one of the things I would say is that, I remember imbibing some anti-Blackness when I was on my way to Howard, wherein I was saying to my mama, well, I don't know, because, the world is not all Black and it won't prepare you for the real world. This is a thing that like our young people hear, and it's just patently false, right? Being in Black college space is the healing moment in preparation for the moment when you have to go out and fight. It is the moment where you pour in to that endless well where you come to understand that the world can be different. But the other thing I learned at Howard was that the world actually does look more like what we're doing at Black colleges. The world is full of people of color. It's here in America where we tend to think that whiteness is the norm, but that is not the standard around the world. And so part of what I would tell young folks who are thinking about moving into predominantly white spaces is understand this: you are as prepared, you are as intelligent. There is nothing inferior about your education, your preparation, your access. None of that. Your access you might not have had, but your education, preparation, intelligence, all of those things are intact. And I think that folks didn't know what to do with me when I arrived at my PhD program, because there's a moment where we're sitting around the room. It's a mix of white, Black, and students of color. Everybody's talking about where they did their undergraduate work. I'm the only person at the table that entering year that had gone to an HBCU. So I said, Howard. And I noticed that the sisters that had gone to Ivy Leagues, sort of snapped like, oh, wait a minute, right? They didn't say anything, but there was very much this sort of question about like, can she hang? And I'm like, how you like me now? But here's the thing. But I had that energy in the moment because I was like, but see, we're all sitting here at the table together. So clearly I can hang because your Ivy League degree and my HBCU degree brought us right here to the same place. The argument has already been won. I don't even need to open my mouth. My presence has won the argument. And you got to walk with that kind of moxie everywhere that you go. You got to know that our institutions are not inferior. They have struggled because they haven't had the money, the funding, the access, all of those things, but it's never been about inferiority. And once you know that, then mostly you'll just be looking at people in amused pity, right? In these places when they dare to underestimate your ability to show up and show out. And I think it's also why I sort of show out a little bit, because I'm like, I don't have anything to prove to you. Right. So I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm going to do, and whatever I want to do is the thing that's going to be most useful to Black people. And that mission remains true for me in the whitest of white institutions. I'm looking for the young Black people that I can be helpful to. I help all my students, and I look out for my Black students because they need and deserve to see faces like ours in these places.
Okay, we have a question from one of our students.
Wonderful.
And the first one is Tamiko.
Hey, Tamiko.
Hello, how are you, Dr. Cooper? Thank you again for being here. As an educator of elementary students, in Staten Island, I'm also a school lead for a program called My Sister's Keeper. So what advice would you have for young women, young girls that age, elementary school age, as they're coming up in this world with respectability and accountability? What advice would you have for girls that age?
Yeah. So I just finished a couple of book projects for younger people. So late last year, a couple of my homegirls and I wrote a book, released a book called Feminist AF. It's for middle school and older, really trying to give them the sort of tools to think about their world in relationship to all of these big concepts in an accessible way. And so I would say for them, it is that giving them the tools early, the analysis early is really important. Mm-hmm. But what I would say to elementary school age kids is like, but these kids are thoughtful and critical, and they want to have the conversation. So go ahead and have the conversations with them, because it's like when, we see these white parents and they're out talking about critical race theory and they're like, I don't want my child to feel bad and they're too young for that. And I'm like, but our children are not too young to experience racism and sexism.
Right.
So at the point where they're not too young for that, then we don't have a respite to be able to not talk to them about it. Right. The first time that I go home and tell my mother I'm called the N-word, I'm a third grader. And I'm like, what does that word mean? You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so I just wrote a storybook that will be out in August for elementary age children called Stand Up. 10 Mighty Women Who Made a Change. And one of the things that I try to do in that book is introduce Black girls to Black girls and women across history who have made a change in their environment in some way. And I hope that for children who are not Black, who are non-Black, that a storybook like that will also cue them to understand that Black girls and women are valuable and have shaped the landscape that they are growing up into. And so that is the thing is, the last thing I'll say about this is one of the most formative moments for me happened as a fourth grader. I had a Black woman teacher, and she would come into class every morning and she would sit on the stool and talk to us. And apparently I was like giving this Black woman teacher hell. I was just asking her all the questions all the time, everything that she wanted to know about. I was always asking these questions. So finally one day she pulls me to the side and she says, "Do you question your white teachers like this?" I'm 8. I'm 9, right? She didn't think that I was too young to get a lesson in power dynamics. And the thing is, I thought about it and I was like, no, I don't. And then her response to me was, never stop questioning. Question everybody, right? And so all of a sudden, then I was a whole problem from that point forward. But what she realized was that I was conceding them more authority than I was conceding her, because she was a Black woman. I had already imbibed all of this stuff, but she didn't lecture me about that. She pointed out the power dynamic to me, and then she affirmed the skill set I was using and said, no. The problem is not that you ask questions of me. The problem is that you're not asking questions of everybody else, the people that you need to ask questions of, right? And so it also taught me over these years that young people are far more astute, engaged, and observant than we think they are. And our job is to shape and mold that from as early as we possibly can. One more thing. I've been helping a young Black girl in my life, a relative, who is a 10-year-old fifth grader who has been dealing with sexual violence and just disclosed that to the adults in her life, to navigate that. These kids are coming with that stuff. So we're not saving them by not giving the analysis about power, about consent, about what it means to tell one's own truth, about the ability to name the universe as it exists for them, right? Those are ways that we empower and equip these kids, and whatever set of tools we can have to do that, that's going to help Black girls to win. Because the biggest mistake that people make with Black girls, and the mistake folks made with me, quite frankly, just because I was making A's didn't mean that I was mentally well. I wasn't mentally well as a fourth grader. I wasn't mentally well as a freshman in college when I was pulling down A's but suffering with depression. We miss it because we're like, but as long as you're overachieving, put together, respectable, and you act nice, then you're fine. And then we wonder why Black women show up like us being overachieving, high achieving depressives. But it's like, because we trained them to be that way at 8 or 9. We train them to be that way at 18 or 19, and we don't know how to solve that problem. And it starts by actually beginning the conversations really early. Baby, how you feeling today? What's going on? Use your words, right? All of these sort of social emotional pieces of this become really important for Black girls.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have a question from Latasia.
One, I just wanted to say I'm truly delighted that speech was beautiful. I am mad at myself, so I totally agree, because it's a lot that goes on and stuff that I go through. So I totally agree. But my question is, so what would you do, or what advice would you give to someone, like, so somebody that's a different race from you or the same race, but they're giving you problems and they're not trying to listen to your ideas or help you grow, what advice would you give them?
Well, I mean, one of the things is to figure out, we have this concept called emotional labor. And emotional labor is like the emotional work you have to do to manage other people's feelings, right? So you smile because you don't want people to think you're angry, right? That's emotional labor, You say it soft, for me, I get when Black girls get passionate, we get loud, right? And so, my mom will always be like, watch your tone, watch your voice, stop being so loud, right? But see, all of that is about us trying to not take up too much space. And that's emotional labor where, we're always sort of trying to figure out if we're going to be okay. So you got to decide how much emotional labor you want to give to these people and if it's going to be reciprocated to you. And one of the ways you will know that if after the interaction you feel exhausted and they haven't changed at all, like you feel like, whoa, that was a lot. I'm tired, and you haven't changed your opinion, right? Then that might mean that you need to recalibrate how you're engaging. You know what I mean? Like there is no magic bullet for that. There is an assessment about who is worth that kind of work and who is not worth that kind of work, right? The other thing, though, is that the people that are meant to be your people and that you're meant to be in connection with, they're going to be the kind of folks that aren't working to give you problems. Even if there's a misunderstanding, like they willing to meet you there and work it through, and they don't take pleasure in being offensive, right? But if they're like, no, you just don't know what you're talking about, you have to understand, but I do know what I'm talking about. And then once you know that, your job is not to defend yourself. It is not to explain yourself. It is to simply stand in your truth, right? Because the minute you start having to explain, they've already won, right?
Yeah.
And so I start to say to people, look here, and I didn't do anything wrong. And when I do wrong, I'll be like, I was wrong. My bad. Okay, let me get my life together. When I'm not wrong, I'm unmovable. And a Black girl who knows she right and is unmovable is a whole problem. Be that girl. Do not move. Stand on your square. Do not move. And when other people are like, well, you're just so whatever, you'd be like, well, why are you offended that I'm confident in my position? Ask them to start justifying themselves. You don't explain and justify yourself, right? This is a thing that this is a gendered thing, right? Black women and girls, we overwork, we over prepare, we do all of these things to modulate because we want to be respected. And when you watch the way dudes move, they do not. When you get to jobs, men ask for more money. When you get to the email, we're not like, I just wanted to send this to say whatever. They don't put just in the email to modulate. We say, I just wanted to such and such, right? I'm just checking in. It's not just checking in. I haven't heard from you, right? When you send a text message, just checking. Where you at though? You know what I mean? Like you see all of those little adjustments. See, that's labor that Black women and girls do that we don't get any credit for and no return on investment. And so early on in your life, the minute that you set boundaries around the emotional energy and labor you're going to invest, you will lead a healthier life once you decide that your boundaries are sacred and that everybody is not worthy of you doing all of that work.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Cooper, this was 2 questions, but I'm going to put it together as one. Can you please differentiate between feminist theology, womanist theology, and grown woman theology?
Yes. Well, look, so womanist theology, as you well know, Dr. Jones, is a whole, dynamic branch of theology that was started and pioneered by Black women really beginning in the 1980s to respond to the racism of feminist theology, which was largely centered on the experiences of white women, and the male-centeredness of Black theology or Black liberation theology that couldn't quite seem to take Black women's experiences into account. It is rooted in the term coined by Alice Walker, womanism, which she coined in 1979 and enumerated on in the early 1980s. And so that body of scholarship is one I have been trained in, that has been formative for me, and that has said that we have to have a theology that speaks to the lives and experiences of Black women and girls. Feminist theology as a broader project has tried to have a critique of patriarchy and gender relations within theology more generally, but has suffered from its overarching commitments to whiteness. And then grown woman theology is a thing that I coined in Eloquent Rage. I mean, look now, y'all Christian folk, and I don't always know what kind of Christians I'm in a room with, so I'm not going to show out too bad because, because I have been raised right. But grown woman theology is really a chapter of Eloquent Rage where I try to have a conversation about the limiting ideas and messages that I got about sexuality as a young person growing up in the church, and about how my own grandmother, who was a church lady, helped me to come to a theology around sexuality and pleasure that was more useful, still spiritually grounded, but was not rooted in the kind of true love waits, sexual chastity arguments that are often given to young people people. And so in that chapter of the book, I try to lay out the politics of the kind of sexual theologies that we have been given, the ways in which they're designed to participate in and show up white supremacy and patriarchy. And then what does it mean for Black women to claim a kind of theological liberation around their own sexuality and pleasure? Because one of the things I know is that if we're willing to reclaim that kind of intimate space for ourselves and to understand that work as godly and sacred, it often creates the space for us to have a much more expansive conversation about our theology when we walk through that particular door. And I tend to, just to throw a monkey wrench, I tend to call myself like a Black feminist theologian, right? In part because some of that is also about institutional location. I don't have seminary training, right? And so I tend to think of womanist theology as a particular kind of institutional project that grows out of out of the theological academy. I came up in the secular academy being trained by Black feminist women who said, we don't really do womanism. We respect it. We understand it. We teach it. And their distinction, right, which is the distinction I have adopted, is that sometimes, right? Now, look, I know a lot of fierce womanist theologians. I would say I have a crew of them that are my homies. So I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but part of the challenge is that some of that early womanist work really was interested in not alienating Black men and saying Black men are not our enemy. And the thing that I think that a Black feminist perspective says is really that it isn't about Black men in that way, but rather Black women are at the center of our own politics, right? And so I'm not going to make political decisions based on whether or not white women like it or Black men like it or how they feel about it. And so there's a way that when you call yourself a feminist in a Black space, it's still super disruptive. And I particularly like that. But I do think that sometimes the distinctions fall away. And what I like to tell people is when the revolution comes, I'm not going to ask whether you're a Black feminist or a womanist because I don't actually care. Like, you know what I mean? I care about your commitment to freedom for our people. And whatever you want to call that, I'm good with, long as the praxis is correct, right? So.
Okay. And just one more question. I'm sure in our body of students, there are budding writers.
Yes.
Who are preparing for writing careers.
Yes.
So what would you say to them? What advice would you give them? How can you affirm them and challenge them?
Yeah. I didn't, it's only quite recently that I started to call myself a writer. I was not one of those, writer folks who grew up knowing that I would always be a writer. What I wanted to be was a teacher. And on my way to becoming a teacher and a professor, I also, by extension, became a writer. What I would say, if you have the opportunity while you're in college, take a creative writing course, take a good writing course. This is the moment to refine your writing skills. We're turning out generation after generation of folks who don't actually write particularly well. I see it with my own students, right? And it has to do with the way that we do writing instruction. But I took courses on writing as a college student because I wanted to learn the craft of not just like good sentence structure, but also how to make sentences flow against one another when you're writing a piece. How to use active verbs all of the time. I'm really talking about things that are related to craft, right? So it's not just messaging, but it's also about how you render the words on the page. And it turns out that you can actually do a good bit of study to really learn that. And then I would say, if you're a writer, writers write. That's what we do. And so your job as a writer is to write, to figure out the thing you want to say, figure out who your audience is, figure out the best way to say it to that audience. And if you are showing up in the world, doing the work that you are appointed to do, and doing it well, and with a level of skill and respect for craft, the audiences will show up. They have a way of doing that. So your job as a writer is simply to write and to get better and better and better at it, and trust that as you are out in the world doing the work you are supposed to do, as that old saying goes, if you build it, they will come.
Thank you, Dr. Cooper. This hour has been amazing, and I really appreciate you sharing with our Clinton community. And I wish it could go on longer. And it has been a particularly a wonderful time for me to get to meet you.
Yes.
At this time. And I look forward to more conversations in the future.
Yes.
I believe now we're going to bring up Prez, I think it's his time to come on.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. You were a splendid host. My God, I think you got a future in this.
Yes, I agree.
Dr. Cooper, oh my God, what a blessing. Thank you for your work and your witness. You gave no less to us than you do on MSNBC and in your lectures. Not only did you understand the assignment, you took it seriously, you tailored it for us, and we are so grateful. As I mentioned to you earlier, I'm a big fan of your work. We have a whole lot of mutual friends. Dr. Leslie Callahan, I love dearly. Oh, yes, indeed. She is outstanding, great womanist theologian and leader. For those of you who don't have this book, you need to go get it, especially in the context of the hearings that are going on for the next Supreme Court justice. I'm so proud of the way that KBJ has handled herself. And she has shown us that she's living beyond respectability.
Absolutely.
So thank you for breaking it down for us. And I also want to say to the brothers who are watching, this is an opportunity for us to be in solidarity with our sisters. We need to hear more. We need to learn more. We need to be more empathetic and more supportive. And this is a teaching moment for us. So, Dr. Cooper, you blessed the brothers today. I know the sisters are on fire right now. I can feel that. I see it in the chat. It's YouTube and Facebook is on blaze right now. But the brothers have also been blessed. And I want to encourage those of you who are watching to share this link with everyone you know. If you know some brothers who need this, please share it with them. And someone put in our private chat that we could use this in the future for teaching in freshman seminar and in religion courses. I mean, this has been wonderful, Dr. Cooper. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. And as I say to all of our guests, you're now part of our family. So I know you an HU alumna. Now you're part of the Clinton family. All right.
I'll take it.
So you have a standing invitation, and we will be calling you to come back to be with us again in the future. Thank you so much. Let me encourage those of you today to join us in the future. Our chapel service as a part of our Women's Month chapel this Sunday. Dr. Lisa Allen McLaurin, who's been with us before, she will focus on womanist worship. There she is. We want you to join us at 5:00 p.m. on Sunday. And then on next Wednesday, Minister Candace Simpson from Brooklyn, New York. I know her father well, and so glad that she's going to be sharing with us in our Beacon Forum on next Wednesday. Please pass the word, tune in and be with us. And we hope that you will engage in dialogue with our presenters. Thank you all for joining us today. I think now we're going to go to the alma mater. God bless you and have a great day.
Clinton, our dear old school.